Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark. Story 1. I got hired at Terminus, a truck stop in the middle of nowhere. Something is wrong here. I could barely breathe as I drove down the street. Tears slid down my cheeks, and I was gritting my teeth so hard it felt like my molars were going to crack. Eventually, I pulled over. I wasn't going to be able to drive right like this. I had to keep moving my black hair out of my face. Eventually, I kept my fingers lacing my hair, pressed the back of my head to my car seat, and screamed. I screamed so hard that my throat burned, that I felt it deep within my chest, that I could feel my emotions exiting my body. My heart felt like a train, threatening to burst from my chest. My brain felt like it was burning. I took a few deep breaths and let my hair go. 3 weeks ago, my sister came to me. She told me that she was having terrible nightmares. She showed me her arms. Deep bruises covered her wrists, and her fingernails were bruised. Bruises went right up her arms. She removed the makeup from her face to reveal a deep black eye and a gash across her nose that she had been concealing with a Band-Aid. She showed me everything. My sister just turned 16, and my first thought was that someone had been hurting her. I questioned her, assured her that I would take her to the hospital, and that everything would be okay. But she was adamant that it was just bad dreams. I went to my father with concerns. He told me that Miley was probably getting into fights at school and was trying to cover her tracks or something. I knew that he would go and yell at her if I continued pressing, so I let it go. My father had become increasingly stressed ever since our mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. Malia and I went from being his best girls to the most hated people in his vicinity. It fell on me to help my sister, and she tried to hide her stress and fear well. I had to watch my mom when my dad was working and my sister was at school. I tried to keep everything together for all of us, but as time went on, I just wanted to make sure Miley and I ended up okay. And I know that sounds selfish. Last week, my mom left the house around midnight. My dad wasn't home yet, and Miley was asleep. I could catch her and be back before anyone knew that we were gone. It would be fine. Everything was going to be okay. But it wasn't that easy. My mom took me on a chase. She ran as if she had somewhere to be. I was gone for about 30 minutes. My mom mumbled about the moon the whole time, how she felt like it was moving her blood. When I got her home, I went to check on Miley right away. If she woke up from a nightmare, she would want company before she fell back asleep. I moved up the stairs as fast as possible. I was only gone for about 30 minutes, so she should have been okay. My mind was screaming at me to check on her. When I entered her bedroom, my foot was lifted from under me, and I had slipped on something. I quickly slid my right hand along the wall and turned on the light. As soon as my eyes adjusted, I could feel my body grow tense. My whole body felt stiff, like I couldn't move or scream. Even if I wanted to, blood coated her black blanket and matching sheets, her white pillow, and the floor next to the bed. Splatter carried up the wall and nearly reached the ceiling. It was everywhere. The window was wide open, and as soon as I noticed, I ran right over to it. There was no one outside. To make a long story short, I called the cops, and after they investigated, we were told that no one can lose that much blood and survive. My father was their primary suspect. He blamed me, threw me out. My mom went to a home, and now here I am. I eventually composed myself enough to turn on the radio, hoping that some music would help me calm down, but I couldn't get a connection to any radio station. Each channel I flipped through landed on dead air. Eventually, I left one of the channels on and continued driving. I was hoping to find a motel or something. A bar especially sounded nice. Eventually, my radio buzzed alive, and a man's voice spoke. Are you a lost traveler? Looking for a place to belong? Seeking refuge from your stressful life? A jingle played behind the sentence. The smooth-talking man made my ear twitch. Something about his voice was calm and extremely inviting, enticing even. The terminus truck stop is what you're looking for. Just take a right and come on in. We are hiring. The man exclaimed before my radio turned off completely. I was admittedly pretty shocked, and it made me laugh. It was as if something came over me. I don't know what it was, perhaps curiosity, or maybe the realization that I needed a job after being kicked out. It was the middle of nowhere, though. There was nothing but a long stretch of road behind me. A few cars drove past me, and I continued driving, picking up speed a little. After about 15 minutes, a turn came up as if it had appeared from nowhere. I gripped the steering wheel as hard as possible, maybe too hard. As I came down the road, my eyes slowly widened. Sitting at the end was a truck stop, one of the biggest I had ever seen. The building itself was white with a red trim. There was one large area with the word food in bright red letters. I figured it glowed when the sun went down. The other half of the building was much bigger and had multiple words plastered on the side. Sleep plus TV plus games plus fuel. The Terminus building sign sat on a tall white board. It was lined in red lights, and the words were a bright, beaming blue. I watched as it twisted for a second before eyeing a row of red gas pumps with white trim and bits of blue sprinkling in. Some trucks were parked around the area, many of them for companies I couldn't recognize. As I got out of my car and walked inside, the smell of the most delicious chicken hit my nose. I suddenly felt starving, like I could eat a whole buffet. The checkered floors and retro soda machines brought a smile to my face for reasons that were hard to explain. The tables were white and red, and the counter and booths were blue and white. Various paintings hung on the walls, and I couldn't help but take a moment to look at them. I weaved through the lines of people to read some. The first painting that drew my eye was a large farmhouse surrounded by beautiful rows of corn. An older man, a woman, and a dog sat on the porch. 4 scarecrows, each wearing a different facial expression, were peppered throughout the corn. The plaque read, "Mercy Farms, $16.99. The painting looked like it was done with a lot of love and care by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. I moved to the next painting. Large apartment buildings that stretched on forever littered the canvas. The detail was sublime. I could see people painting the windows. Cars that looked like models I had never seen parked in various parking spots. Some lights in a few windows, and something in a field of grass that I couldn't quite make out. The plaque read, Littlebrook, 1995. There were so many paintings left to see, I could feel curiosity overtake my brain. It felt like I was diving into something that was calling to me. Maybe that had been calling to me for a long time. I let my body wander over to one more painting. This one was slightly bigger than the rest. The top of the painting featured a large sun, and I could almost feel its heat permeating off the page. Further in the back, I could make out a football field, and even further behind that there seemed to be a blue sun poking out of the tree line. The building in the painting looked like a high school, one that was in pretty good shape. I could see various figures in the windows, and a groundskeeper painted right in front of the building. Green Ridge High School, 2015. I moved to the side to see one last picture. I couldn't help myself. There was a blinding light beaming down on a house and a gray man. At least I thought it was a man, but I was pulled out of my investigation when someone tapped my shoulder. Hello. A man with short red hair and beaming green eyes smiled at me. He wore black cargo pants, boots, and a black t-shirt. He had a red belt on, and a pistol on his hip, and a beautiful white watch sat on his wrist. He looked like he worked out, like he could lift me up and simply carry me away. Hi. I coughed out. My name is Tom. Are you here about the open position? He asked me as he tucked his hands into his pockets. I wondered what brought him to me. There were at least 20 other people in here eating. Was I here to get a job? Part of me was screaming yes, but a softer part was telling me no. My brain was telling me I wasn't ready. I shook my head before putting a small smile on my face. Yeah, I heard the commercial on my radio while I was driving by. I figured I'd come and check it out. I told him honestly. Tom held his hand out, and we shook hands. Come with me to the back room, and let's get you situated, Tom said as he turned and motioned for me to follow. As our shoes clicked off the floor, and the conversations from people eating and waiting in line filled my ears. I let a shock fall over my body. There was no interview, no questions asked. I just got the job on the spot. I walked behind him and smiled at the smells of fresh coffee, baked goods, chicken, and whatever else they were cooking. The people around me wore black outfits, much like Tom. Each one had a red belt on, but no weapons of any kind. The cooks wore white outfits with red belts. I didn't recognize a single brand on any of the packaging, and I was at ease with that. Once we reached the back room, Tom motioned for me to sit across from his desk. As I sat down and sank into the chair, I felt like my body was consumed by warmth. Paintings, pictures, both in color and black and white, and various other objects littered the room. We are hiring for the late shift, for our diner only. Here, Tom said as he slid a small packet across the desk. Please take a look at this. I leaned forward and took the red pamphlet. As I flipped it open, I read the first few pages. Welcome to the Terminus truck stop. During the day, we serve our regular customers. Please treat them with care and respect. When the sun goes down, our clientele changes. Please read the rules below and follow them to the letter. 1. You're not to go outside during your shift. Trash can be taken out at 7:30 a.m. 2. If a creature appears outside, do not go outside, confront it. Leave it be. 3. All of our employees wear a variation of the same outfit. If you see someone behind the counter who does not match this description, kill it with your service weapon. 4. A raven will sometimes appear at the drive-through window. It's harmless. Do not try to get rid of it. Let it be. 5. You are never to go to the other side of the building for any reason. You are never to leave with a trucker for any reason. 6. There is no reason to get to know your co-workers during your first month. Your service weapon is your friend. Use it at your discretion. I blinked a few times and reread the list. The rest of the pamphlet featured the brief history of the location. I was so consumed with reading that it took me a second to realize Tom had placed items in front of me. There was a red and a blue belt sitting on his desk. Each one had a holster. I don't know what came over me. I wasn't nervous, scared, or even slightly concerned. I stood up, reached over the table, and grabbed the blue belt. Tom raised his eyebrow at me. What? I asked as I watched him move and grab a uniform for me. I was being given a blue uniform and a blue set of boots. No one ever picks blue, Tom says with a slight change to his voice. It was deeper. He was looking at me like I was suspicious. I wanted to ask why, but something was pushing me to keep my mouth shut. I was drawn to the blue from the moment I saw it outside. Choosing it happened before I could even think of it. Do I need to sign anything? I asked Tom as I held my uniform tightly. No, but you do have to head into the employee restroom and get changed. Your shift starts when the sun goes down. I felt at home in the uniform. I pulled my hair into a loose ponytail and rested my hand on the empty holster. The people who were cooking didn't bother to introduce themselves to me. They moved almost robotically. The cashier smiled at me and would shoot me a wave every so often. I remembered Rule 6 and didn't bother approaching them. As soon as the sun went down, one of my co-workers called, "Shift time, Valentine!" I blinked. I hadn't introduced myself to anyone. Hell, I forgot to introduce myself to Tom. How did this chick know my name? I hear you. I called back before making a face. I didn't know her name. I couldn't check her name tag, but Rule 6 rang in my ear. I wasn't going to break any rules, especially on my first day. Terminus came alive at night. I thought it was busy in the morning, but wow, was I wrong. Cars filled the parking lot, and the diner became so packed that I had to bob and weave. The place was buzzing with life, and it actually made me feel happy, until I felt something grab my wrist. I was pulled to a man, and he held me close like we were married. His clammy hand hurt my wrist as he clenched it. I could feel his breath beating on my forehead, and the smell of cigarettes and eggs hit my nose. As he held me closer, I could feel the sweat on his beer belly. "How would you like to take a drive with me?" He asked me as he licked his lips. "Sir, let go of me. I am not going anywhere with you." I said seriously as I tilted my head up slowly. His eyes were completely black aside from white dots. My whole body tensed, and I put my teeth together. Fear. true fear, like I was staring at the face of evil itself. I tried to use my hand to reach for my weapon, but my holster was empty. I started shaking, and I could feel tears filling my eyes as he tightened his grip. Rule 5. Never leave with a trucker for any reason. I am not leaving. I spit out, quivering as the man released his grip on me. He turned and simply exited the diner, walking out into the darkness and to a black truck at one of the pumps. I stood there for a second, shaking. I could barely move my legs. I felt my eyes twitch. As people ate and chatted, my body continued to shake. I was still scared, and since I wasn't allowed to go outside, I walked to the closest window. I was looking out at an empty parking lot that would lead directly to the other side of the building. As I sat there watching the emptiness, I cocked my head. Something was moving, and I could barely see it until its head turned towards me. A large creature came barreling towards a window. I once again reached for the empty holster as the beast met me at the window. It was beautiful, gorgeous even, but horrific in its own way. My shaking got worse, and my mind was screaming at me that it wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The creature stood on 2 legs. It was covered in beautiful gray fur, large wings covered in various patterns, adorned in purples, blues, and reds, covered a lot of its body, folded over the creature like a cloak. It had large blue eyes, and it looked kind of like a humanoid moth. It didn't blink at me, and I didn't blink at it. Something compelled me forward. I took a big step and pressed my palm on the window before looking around. No one was bothered by this. No one even looked at me. I turned back to the creature and heard a voice slip inside my head, rattling around my skull. It itched my brain as it spoke. The barriers are lower. The creature spoke to me. What does that mean? I quivered as I asked, almost like I was scared of the answer. You'll find out in due time, Mark 1. The creature hissed at me. Are you here to kill us? I found myself asking before I could process the question. No, I was drawn to you as you are drawn to me, the creature said before turning and walking away. I had to will myself to stay still because I felt compelled to follow the beast. I remembered the rules. I was not to go confront the creatures outside, but it was hard not to want to know more. Was what I saw even real? I thought that I could be asleep in my car, and this whole thing could be a dream. I was snapped out of it by a scream coming from the kitchen. It was blood-curdling. It echoed through the whole diner, but no one turned their attention to it. I quickly sprinted toward the kitchen and pushed the little door out my way to get behind the counter. The cashiers had frozen in place. They weren't turning to help. They paused with cash in their hands, like someone had hit pause on their bodies. As soon as I reached the kitchen, something hit me from the side. The wind was knocked out of me as I slammed into the floor. I forced my eyes open, and as I did, my blood ran cold. A creature wearing a black t-shirt and cargo pants looked down at me. It wasn't wearing one of our belts, though that much I could see. It had short black hair, but no eyes. Sharp teeth hung out of its mouth, and it had one ear that was barely in the shape of something human. It looked like it tried to copy what a human might look like and failed. It opened its mouth at me as I squirmed. It let out the same scream. That got me to come running. Rule 3. I was supposed to kill this thing, but I never received a weapon. I felt something sink into my side. The pain was immense, and I screamed and bucked my hips. I freed one of my arms and slammed my fist into the creature. It didn't budge, and as I screamed for help, it became apparent that no one was coming. Let me go. I screamed as I tried to push the monster. I gagged as I tasted blood at the back of my throat. It rose, keeping its hand inside of me, and I was suddenly being dragged across the floor. I screamed again and tried to kick, but I could barely concentrate as the pain shot through my body. I watched as the creature opened something behind me. I screamed as the creature lowered towards me and sank its teeth into my shoulder. Every other instance of pain I had ever felt in my life couldn't compare to this. My heart rate increased and tears poured out of my eyes. As it ripped its head up, pain shot through my body. I yipped like a wounded dog. It leaned closer to me, licked its lips, and spoke in near-perfect English. Your sister squealed like you when I tore into her thigh. You taste the same. It hissed at me. My brain went static. I couldn't process anything. All I could hear after that was white noise. I came back to it as a tongue slid across my face, and the slime lingered on my skin. You cry the same. It teased. I don't think I ever cried so much. But as the wind hit the back of my head, something willed me to swing my free arm around and reach for my holster. This time, I felt something metallic and cold at my fingertips. My weapon. I let out a scream loud enough to drown out the sound of my beating heart. Fear consumed me in ways that I had never felt before. My right hand shook with trepidation. My head pounded with apprehension. I swung my arm up at the same time as the imposter raised its arm and swung its clawed, human-like hand down at me. I just kept screaming as I fired the gun and twisted my head to try and protect my neck. I felt the claws sink into my face and cut me open with ease. I felt the pain wash over me like water on sand. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw a corpse next to me, its head blown wide open. Half of my vision was consumed by crimson, and half of my body was engulfed in pain. I could tell that I still had my eye. It got me on the right side of my face, on my left shoulder, and stabbed my right side. Yet, I still had the will to get up and move. My ear was pounding. I slowly scraped myself to my feet. As I turned around to see where the wind was coming from, and there it was, the open door. I knew that I couldn't go outside, but there was something about the area that made me pause. The trees swayed in the wind, and I could see figures in the darkness. Some of the figures walked on all fours, some flew, and some seemed to be human, while others were animals. I turned to the corpse and grabbed it by its shirt. With whatever strength I had left, I dragged it to the door and kicked it a few times before I slammed the door. I wasn't about to go outside and deal with that. I wasn't breaking rules, but what the imposter said rattled in my brain. I limped through the kitchen, and everyone had resumed working. As I passed through the drive-through window, I heard something weird. "Hello," a voice cried out. I was looking at the most beautiful raven, and as it looked back at me, it felt like we had reached an understanding. "Hello, I need to grab a medkit." I coughed at the bird, and it cocked its head at me. "You don't belong here." The bird blinked. I faced the bird and narrowed my eyes a little. I could feel the blood running down my body. "I think you might be right." I whispered back at the bird. "Terminus will hold." The bird said before snatching a beak full of fries and flying off. There was a calmness that washed over me being near the bird. I do think that it was right. This wasn't the job for me. I limped back to Tom's office and simply walked in, not caring if I was interrupting. "Tom," I croaked out to the man. He didn't look surprised, though. I was slightly pissed that he didn't come out to help me. No one ever chooses the blue belt. Tom whispered to me as he got up and grabbed a medkit from the dresser next to him. "I have to quit," I mumbled as he dressed my wounds using gauze and a weird paste. It smelled so good, like strawberries and fresh chocolate. "I know. The good news is that this stuff will help you recover. You won't need a hospital, but you'll have to take it easy," Tom said as I raised my shirt, so he could dress my side. I had so many questions. "What is this?" I asked Tom as I watched him pull items from under his desk. My body was still trembling, and I was still scared. For sanctuary for people who are infected by whatever is seeping into our world. There used to be 6 locations like this. However, we are now down to 4. Everything you need to know is in this tome, he said as he pulled out a blue backpack and started stuffing items inside it. "I wish I could help you more, but the longer you stay here, the more likely you'll die," Tom said quickly as he shoved cash into the bag, into a brand new blue wallet, and handed me a stack. He was moving far too quickly to make me feel comfortable. "Tom Dash," I winced. I wanted to ask him why he hired me on the spot, why blue was important, and what the hell was going on. But he got up and handed me the blue wallet and helped put the blue backpack on me. "You have to go. Get in your car and go. Read the book and by the gods, survive," Tom said as he practically pushed me out of the room. As I walked through the kitchen, every worker was staring at me, unblinking, unmoving, just smiling. I quickly made my way past them and made for the door I entered from. The sun was coming up, and my shift was over. I turned to take one last look at the dining area. Rows of white dots stared back at me. I barreled through the glass doors and moved so fast that it made me cry. Pain shot around my body like a twisted pinball. As I spotted my car in the distance and tried to pick up the pace, a familiar voice rang out from one of the gas pumps next to me. I turned to face the Raven, and it turned to face me. "Nevermore?" It asked. "Nevermore." I replied as I made to my car and ripped the doors open. I tossed my bag in the passenger seat and pulled out as quickly as possible, wide eyes still staring at me from the windows of the truck stop. Story 2. I walked into the in-between floor. At 3 a.m., I used to laugh at urban legends. Shadowy figures, cursed buildings, secret floors. Just stories people tell for fun. But after what happened last night, I'm not laughing anymore. It started at 3:12 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I looked at the clock right before I sat up, wide awake, heart pounding like I'd just been yanked out of a nightmare I couldn't remember. There wasn't a sound. No sirens, no knocking, nothing unusual. Just a heavy, sinking feeling in my chest. Like the air in the room had turned into water, and I was slowly drowning in it. I couldn't shake the sense that I needed to leave. Not to run away, exactly, but to go somewhere. Like something was calling me out into the hallway. Half asleep and completely unsettled, I opened the door to my apartment, and instantly knew something was wrong. The lighting was off. The usual bright, flickering fluorescent bulbs had been replaced by something duller, yellowish, and cold. Shadows clung to the ceiling. The walls looked longer, like the building had stretched while I slept. Still half convinced I was dreaming, I stepped out and walked toward the staircase at the end of the hall. But when I turned the corner, there were no stairs. Just a hallway I'd never seen before. It extended far beyond where the stairwell should have been. The floor was carpeted in a pattern I didn't recognize. The walls were lined with dozens of identical doors, perfectly spaced. No labels, no numbers, nothing to indicate where any of them led. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I told myself it had to be some weird maintenance access, or a part of the building I just never noticed. But the deeper I went, the harder it became to move. Every step felt heavier than the last, like the air itself was pressing down on me. My breathing turned loud in my ears, and even the sound of my footsteps seemed swallowed by the corridor. I tried a door. It didn't budge. I tried another. Same thing. Then I felt it, that unmistakable sensation, like something was behind me, watching, waiting. I turned around slowly, and that's when I saw it. A figure. No face. No eyes. No mouth. Just skin. Smooth, pale, stretched tight over a long, human-like frame. It didn't walk. It floated, silently gliding inches above the carpet as it moved toward me. My body refused to move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was being pulled apart molecule by molecule, my thoughts disintegrating. The thing kept coming. No sound, no expression, just a horrible presence that pressed into every corner of my mind. Then, through the panic, a memory surfaced. The tenant's whispers. A story passed around like a joke, but always with a nervous laugh. The in-between floor. A place that shouldn't exist. A trap. I squeezed my eyes shut and backed away. One step, then another, then another. I didn't stop, didn't look, didn't breathe until I felt something familiar. The cold metal doorknob of my apartment. I opened my eyes. I was back. The hallway was normal. The lights were bright again. The building felt real. I slammed the door, locked it, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. That should have been the end. But ever since then, something's been wrong. Each night, the hallway outside my apartment feels different. Like the shadows last a little longer. The silence stretches a little deeper. And the door I don't remember being there is getting closer. One step closer. Every single night. Story 3. The neighbor's kid keeps asking me to check the peephole for someone named Danny. Sometimes my neighbor Amy asks me to babysit for her. I never really complain. She's a polite woman, a single mother. Her daughter Emma is a calm, quiet 5-year-old. Sweet kid. She mostly obeys me. Sometimes she pouts and tosses her little tea set around, flipping her tiny plastic table when she gets upset. But she has a strange habit. She tugs at my sleeve and whispers, "Can you check the peephole and see if Danny is here?" I figure it was a game, some imaginary friend she invented for her tea parties. I'd humor her and peek through the peephole. Every time it was empty. By dusk, Amy would return from work, thank me, and I'd head home. Recently, while we were chatting after she came back, I casually mentioned the peephole game. Her face changed. "Alex," she said slowly. Her voice didn't match her usual warm tone. "Please, don't do that anymore." She didn't elaborate, just mumbled that it was a habit she wanted Emma to grow out of, but it didn't sit right with me. The next day, I was back babysitting. Emma played with her dollhouse and tea set like usual, but her mom's warning lingered. Then she looked up at me with those wide, expectant eyes. "Alex, can you check if Danny is here yet?" I hesitated. "Emma, you know Danny isn't real, right?" She frowned. "He is real. I invited him." I tried to keep my tone light. "Emma, he never comes, sweetheart." Suddenly she screamed, "Please, Danny is here." I told him to come. She flipped her tea set, threw cups, tugged my shirt, hitting me with her small hands. I froze. She'd never acted like this. Okay, I said, holding her wrist gently. "I'll check. Just calm down, okay?" I walked to the door, and the closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The air was still, heavier than before. I swallowed hard and cleared my throat. "Mr. Danny, are you there?" Silence. See, no one's. Knock. A single, sharp knock echoed from the other side. My skin crawled. Emma's voice was calm behind me. "Mr. Danny doesn't say anything. You have to peek." I stared at the door, hesitated, then slowly lifted 2 fingers to the peephole. A screwdriver burst through. It stabbed through the tiny opening, grazing my hand. Blood splattered the door. I screamed. Behind me, Emma clapped and giggled. "Danny's here. Danny's here." I stood frozen, staring at the metal jutting out like a twisted handshake. I didn't say a word the rest of the evening, just sat nearby, watching her. When Amy returned, I asked, "Who is Danny?" She stiffened, avoided eye contact, then finally said, "Danny was my husband. He died a year ago. Emma doesn't know. She kept asking when he'd come home. So I told her maybe someday." She sighed. It was just a silly lie. I didn't think she'd still remember. I didn't know how to explain what happened. I just stopped babysitting after that. Now, I can't look through a peephole like I used to. Every time I approach my door, I place 2 fingers on the peephole first, even though it's thick, even though I know it's just metal and glass. I can't help it, but check, even when no one is on the other side. Story 4. I was a custodian at a sleep research facility. This is why I quit. Custodian. The official definition is a person who has responsibility for taking care of or protecting something. But that wasn't what I had in mind when I applied. I imagined that I would be pushing a mop bucket down vacant nighttime hallways, changing fluorescent bulbs in empty rooms, and performing simple maintenance on disjointed door hinges or leaky faucets. For the most part, that was exactly what the job entailed, but it wasn't all of it, not by long. There was one clue in the job description, but in my desperation for work, I passed over it without a second thought. Buried in the requirements was a single phrase, capable of working with an unusual schedule and conditions. I figured that they were referring only to the work hours, which were from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It wasn't until I arrived for my interview that I gave a thought to what the second part of the phrase might mean. The Cerulean Institute was located at the end of a shady, unmarked lane about 20 minutes out of town. It was an ugly, bone-white structure perched atop a grassy hill that looked like it must have been murdered to mow. I felt suddenly grateful that groundskeeping wasn't one of my responsibilities. Everything was clean, discreet, and obviously dripping with money. But even after I had walked into the lobby, I still wasn't quite sure what the place was for. The receptionist greeted me with a smile, buzzed me through a sleek frosted glass door, and led me into a small office. I was pretty sure that the way her azure outfit matched the furniture was no accident, and I was still wondering whether I was going to be expected to wear some cheesy, badly fitted uniform when a handsome, curly-haired man in a white lab coat knocked on the door. The man introduced himself as Dr. Narcy, and sleep, he told me, was his passion. He couldn't understand how other scientists could devote so much time and energy to studying the ocean depths or the void of space when over a third of our own lives, our sleeping lives, remained a mystery. The best way to study sleep, Dr. Narcy informed me, was through the eyes of those who couldn't leave it. When he saw the confused expression on my face, he just flashed a bright, big-toothed smile and gestured for me to follow. The sight of orderlies in pristine white scrubs and a heavy odor of disinfectant in the air had prepared me for something reminiscent of a hospital. But what I found was far more strange. Not a single patient at the Cerulean Institute was conscious. Everyone was in some sort of coma. Unlike other hospitals, where cries of pain blended with hushed doctor-patient conferences and the conversations of loved ones, this place was deathly calm. There were no intercom announcements, no gallows humor jokes being swapped between nurses on break. The quiet, Dr. Narcy explained, was important to ensure that no outside variables would interfere with the work that he and his fellow researchers were doing. I, too, would be expected to keep noise to a minimum. Looking out at all of those corpse-like figures, hooked up to beeping machines in their anonymous sterile rooms, was the closest I came to backing out. The whole thing was just so damn eerie. At the time, I told myself that I was being foolish, throwing away the only job opportunity I'd found in months just because I'd gotten goosebumps seemed like the stupidest thing I could do. The thought reminded me that Dr. Narcy hadn't asked me any of the typical interview questions or gone over my resume at all. When I mentioned it, however, he just snorted. The Cerulean Institute had already thoroughly investigated my past. He assured me, if there had been any doubts about my adequacy, I never would have been allowed to the front door. The only real question now was whether I felt comfortable carrying out my functions in such an environment. There had been problems in the past, he admitted, with employees who had succumbed to their superstitions and quit unexpectedly. I forced a laugh, trying to make it seem as though I hadn't been on the verge of bolting for the door and leaving all those blank, wax museum faces behind me for good. Dr. Narcy didn't look very convinced by my false bravado, but he appeared to appreciate the effort. He placed a large, tan hand on my shoulder and guided me back to the reception desk to fill out the paperwork. I would have gotten a more accurate understanding of the place. I realized later, if my first visit had been at night, during the day, the patient-to-staff ratio was something like 1 to 5. On the night shift, it was more like 1 to 16. As if that weren't enough, the lighting was reduced to half strength after sunset. The doctors claimed that it was about maintaining natural sleep cycles, but I wondered whether the Cerulean Institute might just be trying to skimp on the electric bill. They were running a lot of machines, after all, and I had no idea what most of them were for. Either way, the combination of dim lighting and vacant spaces made the place a lot more disturbing after dark. There was something else too. I soon discovered that entire wings would be marked off-limits, sometimes for days at a time. Later, they would reopen as though nothing had happened, and another area would be shut down. I received notifications about the closures on the same clunky office software that provided my work tickets. Tasks like unstick Windows shutter room 204 or clean and disinfect storage area C. It's not like I needed them, though. The electronically sealed doors and blacked out windows made it obvious that I was meant to steer clear. Those odd changes in layout made everything take twice as long and gave me the unsettling sensation that I was wandering through a different facility each night. And just as Dr. Narcy had warned me, there was plenty in the Cerulean Institute to feel queasy about. from a scientific standpoint. I knew that the patients were all alive, but with their consciousness drowned deep in a place where the waking world couldn't reach. There was virtually no chance of any of them sitting up in bed with a wide-mouthed scream, or reaching out to grab my wrist with cold, desperate fingers when I passed by. And yet a very unscientific part of me was certain that at any moment it might happen. Those long tile hallways, with their softly beeping machines and rooms full of silent, waiting bodies, became the new setting for my nightmares. In some of them, I was the one in the hospital bed, watching some stranger push a mop bucket down the hallway. I wanted to shriek, to reach out to them, to beg them to free me from the prison of my flesh, but I couldn't move even an eyelash. All I could do was listen to their footsteps fade, like my hopes, into the endless dark. The orderlies, however, didn't seem bothered by the place at all. The fear is like seasickness, an orderly named Jamie told me one night, when we both caught each other sneaking a cigarette around back by the dumpsters. You either have it or you don't. Me? I sleep like a baby when I get home. They're just lumps of meat, man, you know? Don't let it get to you. Jamie was a big, stubby, bald guy with thick black glasses and a smoking habit that was even worse than mine. He had been at the Cerulean Institute for 3 years, longer than anyone, it seemed. Well, there's the Institute, and then there's the Institute. Know what I mean? He told me, when I asked what he thought of the place. Take a look at the doctors and nurses, Jamie suggested, and tell me tomorrow night if you've noticed anything different. I wasn't sure what the point of Jamie's game was, but I played along. It was a way to pass the time, and sure enough, I did spot one small anomaly. About a fourth of the staff had small blue key cards hanging from a lanyard or stuffed into the front pocket of a lab coat. They kept the key cards in places where they could be seen without being conspicuous. A way, I suppose, of identifying one another. If you're going to ask what that means, Jamie said when I reported back to him, you can save your breath. I've got no idea. He took a long, thoughtful drag of a cigarette. My guess is that there are two types of research that go on here. One official, the other, not so official. Am I curious? Sure. But you know what? This right here is an okay gig. The pay is decent. You don't get exposed to bad weather or do much heavy lifting, and the customers never complain. I'm not going to risk it all just to scratch an itch. It wasn't so easy for me to forget about the closed-down wings and blue badges. They wove themselves seamlessly into the fabric of my nightmares. In my mind, I would find myself staring down the hallway at one of those locked doors. As I sighed and turned to push my cleaning cart, I would realize that the floor had begun to tilt slightly. The door flew open, revealing only blackness on the other side. Then lights began, one by one, to go out. I tried to run away, but I was never fast enough. The incline became steeper and steeper until instead of running forward, I was falling backwards, swallowed by the polished tile throat of the Cerulean Institute, like some poor sea creature that had slipped between the jaws of an anglerfish. The dreams were getting worse, but I didn't have them every night, and slowly I came around to Jamie's point of view. I could put up with a little sleeplessness if that was what was needed to keep such a low-stress job, even if it was on the graveyard shift. Things might have gone on that way for years, if it hadn't been for what happened last Thursday night. I was replacing a leaky pipe in one of the restrooms when a low, mechanical moan, like a tornado siren, began to echo through the facility. It wasn't the fire alarm, which I had tested before. This was something else, some other signal whose existence I hadn't been aware of until that moment. I poked my head out into the hallway. Jamie and two other orderlies were already there, looking just as confused as I was. But thin blonde doctor I'd never seen before and one of the nurses were running as fast as they could. Both were holding blue key cards. The rest of us looked at each other awkwardly. I cleared my throat and asked Jamie if this had ever happened before. Never, he said, and shook his head. I told the little group that I would head to the front desk. Maybe there, I figured, I could find some hint of what was going on. I was so lost in my troubled thoughts that I nearly walked face first into the door at the end of the corridor. I had expected it to open when I pressed the push bar, but it didn't. I tried again, and this time there was no room for doubt. The door was sealed. Whatever that alarm meant, one of its effects had been to put us in lockdown. Only the people with the blue key cards, I realized, were still able to move freely through the Institute. I looked around for a sign of what had changed, but found nothing. I couldn't smell smoke or hear any storm. The night outside was black and still. The patients continued to sleep. What had I expected? That they would all suddenly sit up in bed with murder in their eyes when they heard the alarm? The thought made me shudder. But we didn't appear to be in any danger. Not yet, at least. Jamie had begun rummaging through every cabinet and drawer he could find. It took me a few minutes to realize what he was doing. He was searching for one of the blue key cards. I set down my tools and went to help. All the staff who had access to the key cards kept them close at all times, so I didn't have much hope. But we had to try something. What else could we do, apart from waiting around and listening to that maddening noise? We ransacked the place like spies searching for some hidden documents, but no luck. Whatever secret the blue key cards concealed, it was hidden well. I leaned against the push bar of the locked door inside, and then the lights went out. The power outage, if that's what it was, didn't last more than a few disorienting, terrifying seconds. Many of the patients were on life support, and the Cerulean Institute had its own backup generators in case of an incident like this one. Or so Dr. Narcy had told me. The emergency lights, however, were even dimmer than what I was used to, and their color was blood red. Once I had recovered from the initial shock, I realized something. The door I was leaning on was slightly ajar. The circuit must have broken just long enough for me to push it open. I hesitated, then opened it further. I wasn't sure what I was so afraid of. The hallway on the other side was identical to the one I was standing in. There was no sign of anyone, not even the thin blonde doctor or the blue card-holding orderlies. I took a few tentative steps forward, being sure not to let the door slam shut behind me. I doubted it would lock itself again from the inside, but there was no way to be sure. Halfway down the corridor, the hairs on the back of my neck all stood up at once. I heard, or maybe sensed, movement behind me, but when I turned around, the hallway was empty. It was like someone had snuck from one room to another behind my back. But why? The patients were all unconscious, and any other Institute employee would have stopped and said something. My throat was dry and my palms were sweating, but I didn't dare go back to investigate. I needed to make it to the front desk and figure out what was going on. I kept checking over my shoulder as I walked, unable to shake the feeling that someone or something was there. I had almost reached the end of the hallway when I heard the door behind me, the one that I'd left open just a crack, slam shut. It's okay, just keep moving forward, I told myself, then felt that confidence die as I took in the scene around the corner. The thin blonde doctor lay on the floor, her white lab coat stained with blood. I froze, squinting into the crimson gloom. The nurse was slumped, unmoving, against the wall. The moment I saw him, I knew I wouldn't be able to force myself to keep walking down that gruesome hallway. Instead, I stooped to pick up the blue key card that the blonde doctor had dropped. Closer up, I could see that her throat had been slashed with some rough instrument, maybe a piece of glass. More shards of it sparkled on the floor. I backed slowly away. I had to warn Jamie and the others. But first I had to get back alive. What the hell had happened here? Was there some kind of break-in at the Institute? And if so, why? The sound of an agonized scream and a scuffle brought me back to reality. It was coming from the rear wing, where I had left Jamie and the others. Just as I had feared, the door had sealed itself. But I was able to open it again with the doctor's key card. There was no sign of the other two orderlies, but Jamie was there, one hand pressed over a gruesome wound in his neck, the other wrapped around a cut in his belly. He was the one with medical experience, not me, but even I could see that we had to find some way to stop the bleeding. I flung open the wardrobe of the nearest room and grabbed the first thing I found, a bedsheet, then hurried back to him. He was trying to speak, I realized, but his words couldn't make it past his gashed windpipe and the blood burbling down his throat. The alarm overhead blared on. Jamie went pale. His eyes slid out of focus. His knees gave out when I tried to lower him to the floor. It was only then, with the sheet tamping down his wound, that I was able to understand what he was trying to say. Behind you, the bald, barefoot stranger was wearing the same blue hospital gown as the rest of the patients, but she was no sleepwalker. Her eyes were wide with fury and pain. A shard of broken glass gleamed between her bony fingers. I threw up my hands. knowing all along that I was already too late. Then she hesitated. "You're not a doctor," the young woman rasped. Her voice was hoarse, her words uncertain, as though she had spoken in years. She was probably in her early 20s, but she already had the pale, atrophied look that most of the Institute's patients seem to take on eventually. I could see the EEG marks on her head and the 4 hookup in her arm. She must have ripped herself free of it in a hurry. Only some kind of insane desperation could have given her the strength to do what she had done to the others. I pointed to my badge. I'm a custodian." "You got to get me out of here," she gasped. I looked from Jamie, who was bleeding out before my eyes, to the shard of glass in the girl's hand. She had killed my friend, and who knew how many others, but now that she'd lost the element of surprise, I could probably overpower her. Wasn't that the right thing to do? Tackle her before she could hurt anyone else? Then call the authorities? Something held me back. "What's your name?" I asked. A blank look crossed her face. She didn't remember. "Call me Eve," she said slowly, and then lowered the shard of glass. "You don't really understand what goes on here, do you, Mr. Custodian?" I realized that she was shivering. I returned to the wardrobe that I had thrown open. There was gauze, disinfectant, and a thicker blanket that I wrapped around her shoulders. Somewhere around the corner, a door burst open. Eve's eyes grew wide with fear. I rushed her to the open wardrobe, helped her inside, and shut the door. I returned to the hallway just in time to see Dr. Narcy and the 2 missing orderlies barreling down the hallway. Both of the orderlies held tasers, but Dr. Narcy was armed with a pistol. "Where is she?" he panted. I asked him what he meant, grateful that the fear and confusion on my face was genuine. One of the patients, Dr. Narcy explained, had woken up and become violent. Such things had happened before, but this time the nurse on duty had been taken by surprise. She was armed and dangerous, and needed to be apprehended as quickly as possible for everyone's safety, including her own. Dr. Narcy's description of the night's events made perfect sense. So, why did it sound like a lie? I hadn't seen anyone, I answered. I had been working on a leaky pipe when I had heard a ruckus in the hallway. When I had come out to investigate, I had found Jamie lying half dead against the wall. Dr. Narcy studied my face carefully. I had a nasty feeling that he knew I was hiding something, but there was no time to do anything about it now. His patient was still on the loose, warning me to stay put. Dr. Narcy and his orderlies advanced toward the locked hallway where the blonde doctor and several others lay dead. As soon as they checked it, I knew that they would be back. After the door slammed behind them, I returned to Eve. She was curled up in the corner of the wardrobe, her improvised weapon at the ready. When she saw that it was me, she lowered the shard of glass and sighed. I fiddled nervously with the blue keycard in my hand, my mind racing. Now that I had it, I could go anywhere in the facility. So what was the quickest way out? How could I get Eve to the authorities? The real authorities, without being stopped by anyone who worked for Cerulean? "I've got an idea," I told Eve, "but you're not going to like it." The long, rectangular cart that I pushed around for work had a little bit of everything. A shelf for cleaning supplies, a shelf for tools, another that held replacements for expendable goods like toilet paper, and an enormous black trash bag in back. It was more than large enough for someone of Eve's size to climb into, and fortunately, I hadn't collected any garbage yet that evening. I would have a hard time explaining what I was doing pushing my cart around during a lockdown, but only if Dr. Narcy had told the remaining staff in the building what was going on, and I had a sneaking suspicion that he hadn't. "I can't believe this is happening," Eve muttered from inside the cart's trash receptacle a few minutes later. "It's like a bad dream," I offered. "Don't you dare say those words like you know what they mean." Eve snarled, suddenly furious. I glanced around nervously. If anyone heard, we were done for. There weren't many people on the graveyard shift, but I should have run into somebody by now. Where was everybody? Hiding? Crouched down with their heads against the wall, like students in a tornado drill? Or did Dr. Narcy have them all out searching for us? As well? That's what they study here. You see, even whispered. Bad dreams. How to create them. How to control them. You know how certain sound frequencies can affect people's moods, right? Make them feel fear or awe. Even make them hallucinate. The researchers here try and do the same thing. but while you sleep. I doubt that any of the people you're seeing are really in a coma. Like me, they're probably being kept unconscious with drugs, then woken up periodically to check their tear rating. Tear rating? I asked. Terror rating. They want you to wake up screaming gibberish and frothing at the mouth. They want you to be so scared that you don't even know who you are. That's the goal. But why? I was suddenly skeptical. It all sounded so far-fetched. What if Dr. Narcy was right, and this Eve really was some kind of dangerous escapee? Why would anyone want to do such a thing? Think of the possibilities. Eve snorted in disgust. Imagine you work for a 3-letter agency or some kind of corporate espionage operation, and you need to get someone to talk. Imagine you want to completely wipe their brain, or even reprogram them. With the technology that they're building here, you could do it overnight, and everybody else got to sleep eventually. Wait, how did you get here then? I wondered out loud. The last thing I remember, I was in the back of my parents' car, going to the dentist's office to have my wisdom teeth removed. But that was, 3 years ago now. Those bastards probably told my family that I never woke up from anesthesia. They probably asked them to donate the body to science, to make sure the same thing didn't happen to someone else's kid. You don't believe me? Check the medical files. I bet you won't find any car crashes, concussions, or rare diseases. Just blank charts and fake names. People whose doctors sold them to this horrible place for a price. And you've been a part of it. Eve didn't say the words, but I heard them in the aftermath of her explanation, echoing through the crimson hallways along with the deafening alarm and the squeaking of the cart's right front wheel. It was so loud that I didn't hear the nurse running up behind me until it was too late. "What are you doing?" the young man shouted. "Can't you see we're in lockdown?" I put on my best dumb custodian face and scratched my chin. "I dunno," I replied. Nobody told me nothing about it. I was just heading back up front to put my card away. The nurse rolled his eyes and huffed. "Just stay out of our way, okay?" He stomped off down the hallway without another look back. He hadn't noticed the unusual bulk inside the black trash bag, or how my knuckles were white on the cart's push bar. It had worked. We were almost through. Up ahead were the final 2 doors, the ones that led to the office hallway where I had been interviewed by Dr. Narcy. What felt like forever ago. The offices were all shuttered and dark. None of the administrative staff worked the night shift. Eve shuffled slightly in her hiding place, eager to break free. I shushed her and backed out into the lobby. I had never been tossed before, and at first, I didn't know what was happening. It was like being punched in the neck by a lightning bolt, and I went down hard, barely aware of Eve's screams as she kicked and struggled. Dr. Narcy and orderlies had been waiting in the lobby. Of course they were. The tall, narrow windows were too tight to climb through, and even the emergency exits had been sealed. This was the only real way out of the Cerulean Institute, and they must have known that THSKP would have to pass through it eventually. You should have thought about the security cameras before you lied. Dr. Narcy hissed into my ear while the orderlies fought to pin my hands behind my back. But it's too late now. I'm going to enjoy putting you through our program. Maybe it was the prospect of being sent into the hell that Eve had just described which gave me the strength to slip free. Then again, maybe it was just the filthy water of the mop bucket that had sloshed onto the floor during the struggle. I slipped through the orderly's arms and flung my weight into the cart, slamming it onto our attackers. The result was a grunt, a curse, and a high-pitched shriek. I couldn't see where Eve was in all the chaos, but it sounded like she recovered her shard of sharpened glass. I stumbled to my feet and tried to get my bearings. There was Eve, running toward the front exit, to the parking lot. I already knew she wouldn't be able to open it, not without the blue keycard around my neck. The second orderly crashed into me, tried for a tackle, but I was still able to slide the car across the floor to Eve. "Stop her," Dr. Narcy yelled. The orderly's hesitation was just a break. I needed to sprint for the wide-open door. They hadn't signed up for any of this any more than I had, and like me, they were probably starting to have their doubts about the gun-toting Dr. Narcy's orders. The air outside tasted like nighttime, damp grass, parking lot asphalt, and freedom. My truck was just ahead. The dew on its windshield sparkled in the glow of the parking lot lights. Eve gripped my hand as we ran. We were going to make it. The shot rang out just as I was reaching for the driver's side door. As soon as I heard it, I knew it wasn't meant for me. Eve's fingers slipped through my own. I only got the briefest look at what the bullet had done to her head, but it was enough to make the vomit rise in my throat. I scrambled into my truck, keeping my head down as I turned the key in the ignition and reversed, but there were no more shots. No one was targeting me, because there was no need to. Eve was the only first-hand witness, the only one who could have proven what was really going on here. I was a nobody who had worked at the Institute for just a few weeks. No one would believe what I had to say. And even if they did, I was willing to bet that whoever was funding the Cerulean Institute had ways of making the story disappear. They had murdered her to keep her quiet. And there was no doubt that they would do the same thing to me. I drove home barely aware of what I was doing, and as soon as I was to the front door, I made directly for the shower. I screamed into the torrent of hot water. I needed to let everything go, to wash away this horrible night, and plan my next move. I thought about the gas cans in the bed of my truck, and the fact that, unless someone had changed the locks, I still had access to Cerulean Institute. I could burn this nightmare to the ground once and for all. I slept for 12 hours, and when I woke up, only my injuries convinced me that it hadn't all been some horrible dream. There were no calls from my former employer, nothing to indicate that any of it had happened at all. It made sense. From the Cerulean Institute's perspective, the less evidence, the better. I spent all that afternoon steeling myself for what I was about to do. At best, I'd be likely to face prison time, and I had just as many chances of winding up in a shallow grave on that grassy hillside or plugged into one of Dr. Narcy's nightmare machines. Still, I couldn't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I had to act, no matter how horrible the consequences might be. I owed it to Eve. My Maps app showed that there was a golf course on the other side of the woods that ringed the Cerulean Institute. I made my way there an hour before sundown and parked in an out-of-the-way spot that I hoped was close to my destination. I had forgotten how disorienting walking through truly pathless forests could be. Even just moving straight ahead was a challenge. By dusk, however, I had reached the south side of the hill. I squatted down in the undergrowth, watching, but something was wrong. The windows of the Cerulean Institute were dark, and there wasn't a single car in the parking lot. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I threw aside caution and jogged up to the main entrance. The door opened easily to my key card, but there was no one at the reception desk. The offices, too, were empty, from the strange equipment to the trafficked patients. The entire facility had been gutted. Razing it to ground now would do nothing but create a minor inconvenience for an insurance company. Dr. Narcy and his backers had moved everything overnight, but their experiment wasn't over. In a different place, under a different name, I know that the Cerulean Institute is still carrying on its twisted research. Maybe right now, some clueless working stiff like me is pushing his mop bucket down its silent hallways. Maybe right now, someone is going in for routine surgery, unaware that they'll never see their friends and family again, unaware that they're about to spend the rest of their life trapped in an endless nightmare. Story 5. My HOA is giving me gray hairs. I had never been very accepting of the idea of an HOA. I hated them. Owning something like a house and not being able to customize it. Getting in trouble for having long grass. A horrid idea, but it was the cheapest house in the best neighborhood I could find. I wasn't broke, but I also wasn't rich, so I was trying to find a nice middle ground house. $127,000 for a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house was an amazing deal. However, it came with an $87 monthly HOA fee. I was fine with it, was even looking forward to it. Finally moving out of the apartment I had been living in most of college. I worked as an architect. It paid okay. The firm I worked in did decent, and I got to design some interesting things. I was 6 feet 2 inches, about 167 pounds, and 27 years. With sand blonde hair and bright green hazel eyes. Single, hopefully not for long, and decently friendly. I think I got along nicely with the HOA board because I looked well put together. The board itself was mainly a bunch of well-off 80-somethings that told me what was and wasn't allowed. Keep these dang sidewalks clean. Mow your lawn only on Saturdays. Don't be loud after 9, and make sure anything, and I mean anything additionally built, changed, or different, is approved and in line with the HOA. Basic things, I guess. I had never been in an HOA, so I didn't know how strict or not strict this was. I noticed quickly that every house looked the exact same, from the weathering, the colors. Every house was shed had it in the exact same spot, or at least what I saw they were the same. The fences were all brown wood, about 5 feet tall. You could see over them. I didn't think this was the type of place any nonconformism would be looked upon kindly. I got house number 602 on Birch Street. It seemed all the streets were named after wood of some kind. Once I had finished moving in, I had heard a knock on the door. "Hi, neighbor," said an older woman. She was holding a basket filled with what looked like cheap Walmart Bluebell cheese and some gift cards. She smelled like old lasagna, and she looked like she could be on the HOA board itself. "I brought you a welcome basket to welcome you to our wondrous neighborhood," she exclaimed. "My name is Miss Pamela, but you can call me Pam. Here, take the basket." As I grabbed the basket, she patted my shoulder and let herself in. I didn't stop her. I was a little confused as to what was happening anyway. "Hi, Miss Pamela." "Pam, I'm Jacob. Thank you for the basket, but I have some unpacking and things I'm trying to get to, and I just dashed." She cut me off. "I'm not here to socialize all that much either. I just came to warn you." She glanced around. Her face seemed calm, but there was a tinge of something, maybe anger. "Do not try to be different. Don't try to do your own thing. The HOA will hate you for it. I know what you're thinking, and I'd like to tell you, I was a young girl once. Now I know better. Don't try to step out of line." She patted my shoulder again and went to leave. "Thank you, Pam, but you don't have to worry about me." I said, "We'll see then, Jacob." And she left. After the encounter with Pam, I sat the basket in the fridge and took out the coupons that were in it. It was random coupons, Brahms, Kroger's, some gas stations, nothing special. As I was bringing things in, I slammed the corner of a table into the front door. It left behind a long streak and dent, definitely noticeable. I didn't even think I hit it that hard, but it was most definitely noticeable. I was going to have to fix it quick, and I was pretty much done unpacking, so I decided to go find a local hardware store. I decided to grab some of those coupons that Pam gave me, and noticed one for Handy Ham's Hardware. 30% off a pint of paint. "Perfect," I exclaimed. I would have to thank Pam later, and maybe bring her some of the cheese back. As I pulled up to Handy Ham's Hardware, I noticed that there was only one car in the parking lot. I entered, heard a door chime, and quickly saw the paint and would filler. I grabbed what looked like the closest to the door, an off eggshell white, and assumed that once it dried it would be unnoticeable. As I was handing the coupon to the cashier, the only person in the store, he looked up at me. Again, as everyone I've seen, an old man. "Boy, that's an HOA coupon. You better have approval before making changes to your house," he said, his voice raspy. "I'm just fixing a hole. I'll talk to the HOA, but I'm sure I'll be fine." I responded, paying with my card. "Be sure and make sure you have approval on the hole as well. They're more strict than they seem," he said, and handed me my receipt. Confused on why I had to get approval for an accident, I drove home. Pam and 2 other old people were at my door, staring and grumbling at it. "Jacob, why don't you explain yourself?" Pam said she was angry. I hit the door with a table leg on accident and just got the items to repair it. I said, "I don't understand why they cared so much. So you're going to make 2 unregistered changes to your house?" The taller dude next to Pam said, "I'm not making any unregistered changes. I'm just repairing it." I said, "No, son, you have changed this door without permission. It's very obvious." The shorter dude said, "It wasn't a purposeful change. It was clearly an accident." I said, a little annoyed, "This isn't an argument, boy. You will be fined. You should have checked with us first." The tall jerk explained, "What the heck are you talking about? Being fined for what? It wasn't literally an accident." I proclaimed, "Argue with the collector. I'd suggest you don't mess up anymore. Pam said, and they walked off. This upset me greatly. I hadn't even been here 3 days, and I already had to pay an HOA fine. I decided to go inside and watch TV. I wasn't going to go fix the door after what happened, and I wanted to get my Xbox hooked up. At around 8, I heard knocking on the door. I went to go open it, and it was the most average, middle-aged man I've ever seen. When you think of office worker, this is exactly what your mind goes to. It was a little odd how average he looked. So I see that you made an unapproved alteration to your home, and that does come a fine, he said with a very, very monotone voice. He almost sounded like he had no accent whatsoever. It was odd. I thought I was just being rude. Maybe this was what every HOA payment collector was like. It was not a purposeful change. It was an accident, I said, hoping he understood. I understand, but it still depreciates the value of the home, and that will cause the neighborhood to depreciate a little, and that will throw off all the balance we have going on. You wouldn't want to ruin our balance, would you? He asked. I couldn't tell if he's frowning or smiling. It was creeping me out. Of course not. I asked. I was tired of this and was hoping paying the fine would be quick and easy. How much is a fine? $60, he said quickly. That wasn't horrible. I went to go grab my wallet when he said I wouldn't need it. How else would I pay it? I asked. He grabbed my arm. His hands were both warm and cold at the same time. It hurt. I felt the muscle in my arm weaken. My joints felt swollen. I wrenched back. I screamed. That hurt. What was that? I yelled. Something felt incredibly wrong. His face seemed younger. He seemed to have emotion. He seemed happier. Your fine must be paid, he said as he reached forward. I darted back quickly. I closed the door on him. I latched the locks. He started knocking. What are you? What in God's name are you? I said, exasperated. I am the head of the HOA. I am the fine collector. You must pay your fine, he said. As I heard what sounded like mashed potatoes being stirred, the lock began to shift. Hey, you don't have permission to enter. I yelled. I don't need permission. I am the head of the HOA. It was in your contract. I can enter and leave as I please, he said. What came through the door looked nothing like the man that was earlier, a heap of sagging flesh and the strong smell of old lasagna. His hand was mangled, the shape of a key. The other hand looked like a deflated basketball, malformed and squishy. I screamed, you must pay your fine, you must. The thing said. I was running to hide in the bathroom when I tripped on the cord leading from the Xbox to a controller I was charging. I hit my head on the wall. The HOA head quickly came over to me and placed his fleshy paw on my shoulder. I felt my muscles ache and groan. My joints swell. I saw my somewhat long hair turn gray in the corner of my eye. My vision blurred a bit. My bones shifted and my head spun. Thank you. Please make sure to come to the HOA board for approval of any changes next time. The fee will increase. It said, now in the shape of a slightly younger man. I sat crying for hours, confused. I could barely walk. My teeth fell out. I was so hungry. I tried to eat some steak. Cooking it hurt every joint, but I couldn't chew it. I remembered the cheeses. I ate them all. I was going to have to quit my job. How would I explain this to my boss? I figured I'd do it later as I was very tired. I just hoped everyone listened to the HOA. I would hate for this to happen to someone else. Story 6. All the other homeless people disappeared when they bought a strange man's ticket to salvation. Except me. 2 weeks ago, I lost everything I've ever had. I find getting into specifics unnecessary, but I stumbled into a position I'd always found inconceivable. One I regarded as many others do. With an attitude of, that could never happen to me. Well, through a calamity of terribly bad luck and equally bad decisions, it did. Whilst frantically looking for a place to live, a new job, and receipt of a disputed paycheck that served as a final blow to the unraveling of my old life, I found myself sleeping under a constantly traffic-infested bridge alongside a dozen or so other homeless people. Even in this position, I thought myself different to those I shared a living space with. Not better, just different. I would get back on my feet. This was only temporary for me. I couldn't stomach comparing myself to Ed, who had woken up to this view of unsightly concrete every morning for 16 years, or to Lisa, who had done the same for 30, with her weathered face testifying to this depressing truth, nor to any of the others who I never had the chance to speak with, but could tell they had trod this path for far too long. It became my mantra, repeated as I migrated from coffee shop to coffee shop, whilst hunting down a new job, and as I struggled to fall asleep with my mind regret-tinged and senses attacked from every direction in their struggle to adapt to this new environment. I will get back on my feet. And just as things were slowly beginning to come together, the man showed up. The ever-present noise of the traffic above and the hubbub of conversation around late November campfires kept us from hearing the thud of his weighty cane against the concrete until he was within speaking distance. He wore an amalgamated uniform of a tattered, filthy suit jacket and tie with the bottom half of pristine, creaseless dress pants and freshly polished shoes. He enticed all who resided under that bridge with a single sentence, spoken in a voice tinged with a giddy anticipation. Tickets to salvation, available to all for the small price of your worldly possessions. Heads perked up and eyes shot glances at others as his words settled in. People were quietly excited, but confusion reigned king. What is a ticket to salvation? An elderly man who remains a stranger to me asked. The man simply repeated his announcement. He did so in response to every question we had, as if he were a broken record of unclear promise. And soon after, the first desperate soul took him up on his offer. It was Ed. He was one of the few under that bridge I had spoken to at length, in no small part because the early days of his now accepted reality were eerily similar to mine, and as such he saw a version of himself long departed within me. He'd always told me that this wasn't the bottom, that it could get worse, that I should never fall into the tempting trap of acceptance, no matter how long I tried and failed to recapture what I had lost. I only wish I could have given him some wisdom, or failing that merely some comfort, back. The man plundered over to Ed before he had even finished his indication of willingness. "I'll take one off your hands," and soon cast his eyes upon Ed's threadbare, stained mattress and the scattered collection of the belongings lying on it. The man handed it a scrap of paper, and promptly struggled to drag the mattress alongside him. I asked Ed to take a look at his ticket, but his demeanor changed and he refused. The man, meanwhile, enticed the remaining residents with a walk of assurance and that same vow of salvation, and every single one of them exchanged their assortments of belongings for a ticket. I tried to, willing to try anything by this point, when he said something different for first and last time. "I apologize, sir, but you aren't ready yet." And with that, before I could form the words of retort, he and all those except me under that bridge went the way of the wind before my horrified gaze. Their final expressions were at first of slight happiness before distorting into a silent scream as they vanished into somewhere that remains unknown. The places they stood, lived, suddenly vacant where they had seconds prior been inhabited. I never saw any of them again. I went to police, the media, and anybody who might have listened, but my tales were simply those of a man with nothing left to lose. I didn't have any evidence they ever existed. I didn't know any of those people beyond their first names. I didn't even know where most of them came from. But I do know one thing. Nobody comes to save those who have been forgotten. Story 7. The town with no roads. I found a town that doesn't exist on any GPS. But when I went, I found more than I ever could have imagined. No road signs are pointing towards it. I would have never even known it existed if I hadn't found a pile of old county maps in my grandfather's attic. It began when I was doing research for a family history project for my class. I was supposed to research and write about where each generation of my family had lived since immigrating to America. It wasn't hard at first. I knew my parents had grown up in Philly just like me, All I knew about my grandpa's history was that he moved here sometime in his late 20s. I asked my parents where he was from, to no avail. I knew I couldn't ask him. Grandpa hardly spoke ever since he started losing his memory. I drove to my grandfather's house to see if my grandma would be able to help. It had been a while since I'd seen them anyway. It was a struggle finding their house. I drove around for almost an hour looking for it. I can never remember exactly where it is. My grandma wasn't much help. All she said was that it was named Croft Pines. He had never told her much either. She let me look through some of his old boxes in the attic. I found a stack of old maps, all dated from before 1960, that showed a town that didn't appear on any online maps. It was at the end of a 10-mile dead-end road. I've always been a sucker for abandoned places. I asked my girlfriend, Abby, if she wanted to go on a road trip with me to see what we could find out. Worst case scenario, we find some rundown buildings and get to explore a bit, maybe some pictures of my project. Abby was excited for the trip, and we left the day after. The drive was mostly uneventful, just a few-hour drive into upstate New York. Abby was my navigator for the whole drive, reading the maps and telling me when to turn. We got onto the long, dead-end road around 6:20 p.m. The road felt far longer than the 10 miles the map had said it was. But then all of a sudden it stopped. We got out and looked around to the town and decided to follow a long dirt trail that led into the woods. Abby was getting nervous and said to me, "David, this feels wrong. We should go back to the car and come back tomorrow when it's brighter out." I told her we would keep going for another 10 minutes, then turn back. We walked for what felt like much longer than 10 minutes, but my watch said it had only been 3. As I looked up from my watch, I saw the glow of a light up ahead. We got closer and saw that there was a full town. Houses, small shops, and an inn. We didn't want to walk back to the car so late, so we went into the inn to get a room. Abby kept looking around nervously and whispering that she was scared of this place. I couldn't blame her. I was getting nervous here, too. Everyone was barefoot, walking around on dirt paths. There weren't any cars, not even a bicycle. Even the innkeeper seemed off. I don't think he ever even blinked. The innkeeper smiled at us and handed us a key. "You'll be in room 3. We thanked him and headed for the stairs. A little girl stopped us as we walked. "Your suitcase has wheels." "It won't like that." Odd. But little kids are always creepy. We went upstairs and collapsed into bed. We fell asleep almost immediately, but we didn't rest well. We both had nightmares all night, and when we woke up, we realized that we both had the same dream. Something growing, moving deep beneath us. Maybe we had seen something that stuck with us on the way in? Who knows? I left Abby in the room and went to bring the car closer to the inn. There was a dirt lot next to it anyway. Might as well park there. The walk back to the car felt much faster than it did last night. I drove slowly across the dirt trail and parked next to the inn. But I could have swore it was on the other side of the street when I had left. I must have been half asleep still or something. I parked the car and went to find Abby talking with an old lady and her grandson. The old lady stopped talking as soon as I walked in and stared at me, then out the window at the car. "You shouldn't have brought wheels here. It remembers them." They heard it. She then hurriedly grabbed her grandson's hand and led him out of the building, not even paying for her food. Everybody else in the dining room just side-eyed me silently until I went upstairs with Abby. Once I got the door closed, she sat me down and asked, "Have you seen any power lines?" What?" I asked her. There's obviously electricity here, but I haven't seen any power lines. There were none on the road and none in the town. I looked out the window and surveyed the area. Sure enough, no power lines anywhere. Okay, weird enough, but we still have to get some more information about the town. We went out to walk around town to see if maybe there was a library. Something seriously off with these people. They never talk outside, they don't laugh. Everyone just walks with no real purpose. The ground felt as if it was moving under our feet. Stones seemed to move into strange rune-like shapes when we weren't looking. Abby nudged me. "Do you see him? There's a guy behind that tree over there." A man was frowning while peeking at us from behind a tree. "Okay, fuck this. We're leaving today. I don't like this shit." We turned around, go back to the inn, but everything was gone. It was just a long dirt trail again. Abby screamed. What the hell? Where the fuck did it go? We were both shaken to our core. How does an entire town disappear like that? Only seconds after, the trees started creaking and moving unnaturally. They contorted with grown into an archway, revealing another trail. We walked to look down the trail and saw the glow of fire at the end, with people surrounding it. I'm not going down there, I said to Abby, and she agreed. We hurried down the long trail, trying to find anything else. But no matter how much we walked, we always ended up right next to that trail. We could hear people at the end chanting. With no other choice, we walked toward them. I don't know why we did. We never should have gone down that trail. Everyone from the town was at the end of the trail, all surrounding a hole going deep into the earth. They turned to look at us. You woke it up, you rolled over it. It felt you. Now it's hungry. Before either of us could react, several of the townspeople rushed us and held us down. Oh fuck. God please no. We're leaving. I screamed. The innkeeper walked up to me. You can't leave yet. If you do, it'll take us all. You see, it wants a sacrifice to soothe itself. We found that sometimes a limb is enough, or, he paused, or sometimes it wants more, a loved one. I wasn't given a chance to speak. They held a hand over my mouth as Abby was held down. One of them produced an old rusty handsaw and began sawing away at Abby's left leg. She screamed and thrashed but couldn't get away. Eventually, she passed out, and all I could do was watch with tears in my eyes. They took her now severed leg and threw it into the hole. A hush fell over the crowd. A deep, unnatural rumble came from within the hole. Not enough, not enough. Everyone muttered in unison. The innkeeper came back to me. I'm sorry about your little girlfriend. She seemed nice. As soon as he finished talking, Abby's body was dragged over to the hole. They dropped her in. I never heard her hit the bottom. The hole rumbled again, louder and louder. The grip around me loosened, and they let me go. Run. The innkeeper shouted at me. I ran down the trail and found the car somehow right at the end. I got in and sped away. I made it home before nightfall. I couldn't go to the police. They'd never believe me. I don't know what else to do. Please, whatever you do, don't visit Croft Pines, New York. It will eat your memories, your life, everything. I don't know what I've done. My city is disappearing. I've woken something horrible. Places I've lived, streets I used to know, they're fading. I look at a map, and nothing feels real anymore. If any of you know about this and can help, please do. I'm running out of hope. Story 8. I moved to the old abandoned farm of my family, and the animals don't act like they should. I never thought I would write something here. I've always been way too skeptical to believe in random people on Reddit. But honestly, something weird, or at the very least, off, is happening to me. I don't know if it's just me, or if this place, this farm, has something to do with it. But I feel like if I don't let it out, I'm going to lose my mind for real. Maybe it's just loneliness. Being alone in the middle of nowhere can mess with your head. But okay, let me start from the beginning. I inherited my great-great-grandmother's farm last month. That's where I'm living now. It was one of those unexpected inheritances. The kind that shows up in a beige envelope with official letterhead and old paper smell. The message was straightforward. Your name is eligible as the next caretaker of the family property, following the wishes of Ms. Hilda, as stated in the will archived at the City Hall. We request your presence for the official transfer of ownership. Basically, no one else wanted it. So it ended up with me. When I was reading through the will, which came with the summons, I noticed that only women were allowed to inherit the farm. I thought that was kind progressive of her. But that's just a guess. No one in my family ever really wanted to talk about her. Everything I know came from a few drunken slips at family celebrations or whispers when flipping through old photo albums with my grandma. What I do know is that Ms. Hilda was a nature lover. She built a perfectly balanced lifestyle where the animals on the farm lived in complete harmony with her. No grooming, no fences, no sacks of feed. Each animal seemed to know its role, and somehow they all worked together to keep this artificial ecosystem thriving with life. She never had kids, unlike her sister, my direct ancestor, who married a businessman from a nearby town. So when Hilda died, the place was just left behind. No one wanted to give up the comforts of modern life. And just as that, the farm was frozen in time. I mean, big city, luxury, entertainment, convenience. None of the newer generations were willing to trade that to live like she did. Being serious, I only ended up here because my financial life was circling the drain. I was in debt even to the pharmacy down the street. So when I got the inheritance papers, I saw it as my last chance to start over. And maybe to find myself again, to reconnect, find meaning. But trying to do that out here hasn't been easy. As much as I feel connected and even happy sometimes, there are these waves, cold ones, that make every hair on my body stand on end, and I just want to pack everything up and go back to my dad's home. But at first, everything seemed fine. I arrived yesterday, alone, after more than 4 hours of driving, twisting through dirt roads, red clay hills, and eucalyptus groves that bent with the wind like they were whispering to each other. When I finally pulled up to the gate, I was hit by a wall of heavy heat. Crossing through those rust-covered iron gates felt like stepping into a temporal bubble framed in moss. The vegetation here is radiant, lush, and dense. The garden looks freshly tended. The trees are heavy with fruit, almost begging to be picked. The air smells of earth and wild greenery. But there's something else in it too, something fermented. Like life itself drifts through the breeze and fertilizes everything it touches. The closest I can describe the scent is musk, a fragrance of sweat, skin, and blooming things. It feels like I'm constantly wrapped in it, embraced by something I can't quite see. But what really threw me off, what really made me shiver in a weird and silent way, was the animals. Chickens, goats, pigs, ducks, even some dogs, all moving together like a peaceful little society. No piles of droppings, no broken plants, no mess, just calm coordination. It was like the entire environment had formed its own routine to survive, beautifully. I mean, I'm a city girl, raised in an apartment. But even I know things aren't supposed to be this tidy. I still want to double check if someone's been living here. Because honestly, if some guy just shows up out of nowhere, I'm going to lose it. There aren't any fences around the property, and I don't trust the doors or windows. They're all wooden and flimsy, in worse shape than my bank account. After spending several minutes completely hypnotized by the whole place, I parked the car and started unloading some of the boxes into the house. Now, let me talk a bit about the house. It's huge. I settled into the oldest wing, built from stone and rammed earth. It's way more preserved than the Victorian-style front, which has already been half devoured by time and termites. That rustic part of the house drew me in right away. It holds a locked room I haven't found the key to yet, the staircase to the second floor, and what used to be my great-great-grandmother's bedroom. Stepping inside felt like walking into a historical drama set. Everything's still in place. The wardrobe, the carved mirror frame, the old books leaning on the shelves. It was like she could walk through the door at any moment, lay down on the embroidered sheets, and pick up where she left off. That thought gives me chills if I think about it too much. There was no way I was going to sleep in that bed. So I headed back to the car and grabbed my trusty inflatable mattress. I had been dragging that thing around since my days in the Scouts. Still haven't worked up the nerve to lie on the actual bed. The pillows are still fluffed like they're waiting for someone. So no way. I woke up this morning wanting to be productive. I was gently awakened by the golden light of the sun, slipping through the slats of the old shutter. That kind of light that carries a fine, magical dust, dancing in the air like the day itself is whispering secrets. I got up, still in my oversized sleep shirt, and went to rummage through one of the boxes that I left in the kitchen to make myself some breakfast. The kitchen is enormous, one of the biggest rooms in the house, easily. In the center stands a massive island, surrounded by charming little navy blue cabinet doors. Their paint peeling beautifully with age. Came closer and touched the sink. Turned the faucet, expecting nothing but dry clanking, and to my surprise, water came gushing out. At first, it spewed rust, sludge, insects I didn't recognize, and this awful smell, metallic and putrid. But after a few seconds, it cleared. The water turned clean, crystal clear, almost sparkling. I braced for a clog, but when I opened one of the small cabinet doors on the sink, I found a wide black iron pipe thicker than my wrist. I thought to myself, things really were built to last, huh? I even smiled. I ran my hand under the water. It was fresh, cool, pure, top-tier well water. I muttered. I felt lighter, hopeful even, ready to start the day. I went back to the car to grab the rest of my things. More food, dishcloths, sponges, kitchen supplies, even some old spices that were stuffed in the back of the cupboard in my last apartment. The one I got kicked out of, by the way. And I also brought in the cutlery. I forgot it before, and sadly, I'm not Wolverine's daughter to be able to cut something without needing knives. When I got to the side door of the kitchen, the one that opens to the yard, the first weird thing hit me. A pig. A big one, with a white patch on its face. It was massive and looked pretty old. It stared at me for a long while as I awkwardly tried to open the stuck door without dropping the box I was carrying. Eventually, I gave up and set the box down. The moment I did that, the pig casually walked up and, with an unervingly natural push, shoved the door open. Then it just trotted off like it had somewhere to be. I swear, someone must have been living here. There's no way a pig just understands intent like that. It was kind of cute, a little unsettling. Sure, I keep forgetting how massive pigs can be. I picked up the box again, set it on the counter, and went back for the rest, this time jamming a stone into the door to keep it from shutting. Once everything was finally inside, I wiped down the counters and made myself a quick sandwich while watching the animals through the big window above the main sink. The sunlight filtered through the window, catching the old embroidered curtain. Even tattered and faded, it was still beautiful, delicate. The lace filtered the light, casting soft patterns of shadows and glow across the tiles. It was one of those calm, poetic little moments that make you feel grateful to be alive. So I stepped closer to the window, letting the sun hit my face. That's when I saw them, the spiders. Small, brown ones with long, thin legs and delicate thread-like bodies. At first, from a distance, I thought they were just specks of dust or dirt on the curtain. I seriously need new glasses. But when I got closer, I realized they were moving with precision. They were working together. And the weirdest part? They were weaving a single web. One unified, spiraled, symmetrical pattern, fluid and deliberate, almost like a choreographed dance among silken threads. And the design matched the curtain. The spiders were copying the embroidery. My brain just froze. Do spiders do that? Do they have visual memory? Can they replicate human-made patterns? How do they even communicate something like that? I thought about grabbing my phone to take a photo, but something made me hesitate, like photographing it would violate something sacred. I turned back to look outside again, still dazed by what I'd just seen. That's when I realized I was being watched all that time. A group of geese stood at the edge of the yard, just near the hedges that lined the path to one of the gardens. Their necks were fully stretched, all eyes locked on me, unblinking, perfectly still. Those eyes, I was paralyzed. My chest tightened with that eerie, primal sense that you're being sized up. They weren't honking, flapping, pecking at the ground, literally nothing. Just stillness, deep, heavy silence, like they were measuring me after what felt like minutes. I stepped a bit closer to the window. That's when, as if someone had flipped a switch, they all turned and began waddling in single file toward the bushes, their plump behinds bobbing side to side like nothing had happened. It was a strange mix of relief and embarrassment, getting spooked by birds with fluffy but who eat lettuce and worms. Still, something instinctive lingered. I closed the curtains, carefully, trying not to disturb the little lace weavers, still tirelessly at work. I finished my sandwich and tried to move on with the day. Took my things to the bedroom, Cleaned out the dresser, sorted the pantry, opened some of the windows I could manage, let the air circulate. I scrubbed the living room floor, wiped the kitchen and bedroom moldings, and tried to get rid of the black mildew growing in the corners, but no luck. I'll try using bleach tomorrow. I also opened the wooden blinds in my great-great-grandmother's room. The place feels not haunted, exactly, but dense. The air smells like cedar and some kind of faint floral sweetness. Her clothes are still in the wardrobe. Her handkerchiefs are still folded. The old perfume bottles still have liquid inside. I didn't touch much, just enough to dust around. Last night, I had to shove the old bed to the side to fit my inflatable mattress. Only in daylight did I notice that what beneath it is darker, more porous. It scratches easily. Probably explains the smell. After that, I made some food, watched a couple movies, and worked on a freelance project I need to submit next week. When night came, I used my little portable stove to heat some water for a bath. That part felt strange too, but I figured it was just a surreal vibe of showering in a place that feels like a movie set. For some reason, there's no mirror in the bathroom. Afterwards, I made a bit of pasta and got ready for bed. That's when something truly bizarre happened, and why I decided to write all of this here. I was already in bed, about to sleep, flipping through some old notes I found in one of the bedside tables, just lists of herbs and homemade remedies. Ordinary stuff. The window was cracked open, letting in the smell of damp earth in the garden and a chilly breeze that made the curtains sway. I got up to close the curtains, and that's when I felt it. A chill on the back of my neck. A silence so dense it didn't feel like the absence of sound, but the presence of something that didn't want to be heard. I leaned closer to the window, trying to spot movement. And then I saw him, the old pig, frozen, his huge shadow split by a stripe of moonlight, standing right at the edge of the trees, where the dark begins. He wasn't making a sound, wasn't moving, just staring, directly into my eyes. And it wasn't the vacant, curious stare of a farm animal. It was locked in, intentional, too aware, like he was analyzing me, judging me. That same look a teacher gives when they know you're about to lie. That look that crawls under your skin. My breath caught in my throat. My knees felt weak. My mind flashed back to the geese. I shut the curtains. Fast. Took a few steps back. Then stood in the middle of the room, frozen, waiting to hear something. Hoof steps, a grunt, anything. But I heard nothing. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just the isolation. Maybe I'm cracking. But still, has anyone ever seen anything like this? Maybe I'm overreacting. I've never lived with animals. I was raised downtown, surrounded by streetlights and concrete. I know pigs can be smarter than dogs. But that look was something else. The glint in those dark eyeballs, glowing faintly in the moonlight. It's still gnawing at me while I write this. Sometimes I think that if I open the window again, it'll be there, right in front of my face. I can almost feel his breath. Smell it, like he's still here. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Sometimes when my eyes glimpse the curtains, I see a shadow on them. Closer than ever to the window. Maybe these animals are just curious. Maybe they've never seen a human before. But some part of me can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone out here, and that this farm remembers things I don't understand yet. Tomorrow I'm going to keep searching for the keys. Maybe they'll open more than just doors.